ethology. Ethology is a combination of laboratory and field science with a strong relation to certain other disciplines such as neuroanatomy, ecology and evolution. Ethology word was derived from the Greek word ethos meaning character and logia meaning the study of. It is the scientific study that deals with the animal behavior. The simplest definition of behavior is movement, whether it is the movement of legs in walking, wings in flying or heads in feeding. Naturalists had recorded incidental observations of behavior for many centuries, but no real attempt at the scientific study of behavior was made earlier than about a century ago during 1930s with the work of Dutch biologist Nicolaas Tinbergen and Australian biologist Konrad Lorenz and Carl von Frisch, joint winners of 1973 Nobel Prize in Physiology and Medicine. Behavior or muscular contractions comes in orderly sequences, recognizable patterns of behavior which can be called behavioral units. The same animal will produce the same pattern of movements again and again. Different members of the same species will also behave in recognizably similar ways. Behavior can only be studied because of this fact. Ethologists are typically interested in a behavioral process rather than in a particular animal group and often study one type of behavior, for example aggression, in a number of unrelated animals. The desire to understand animals has made ethology a rapidly growing field. Since the turn of 21st century, many aspects of animal communication, animal emotions, animal culture, learning and even sexual conduct that experts long thought have been re-examined and new conclusions were reached. New fields have been developed such as neuroethology. Understanding ethology or animal behaviorism is very important in animal training. Considering the natural behaviors of certain animals or specific breeds of animals enables the trainer to select the breed best suited to perform the required task. It also enables the trainer to encourage the reperformance of certain naturally occurring behaviors and also the discontinuance of undesirable behaviors. Let's understand its relationship with comparative psychology. Comparative psychology also studies animal behavior, but as opposed to ethology is construed as a subtopic of psychology rather than of biology. Historically, where comparative psychology researches animal behavior in the context of what is known about human psychology, ethology researches animal behavior in the context of what is known about animal anatomy, physiology, neurobiology and phylogenetic history. Furthermore, early comparative psychologists concentrated on the study of learning and tended to research behavior in artificial situations, whereas early ethologists concentrated on behavior in natural situations, tending to describe it as instinctive. The two approaches are complementary rather than competitive, but they do result in different perspectives and sometimes conflict of opinion about matters of substance. In addition, for most of the 20th century, comparative psychology developed most strongly in North America, while ethology was strong in Europe. A practical difference is that early comparative psychologists concentrated on gaining extensive knowledge of the behavior of very few species. Ethologists were more interested in understanding behavior in a wide range of species to facilitate principal comparison across taxonomic groups. Ethologists have made much more use of a truly comparative method than comparative psychologists have. Lamarck's theories. Until the 19th century, the most common theory among scientists was still the concept of Lamarck's theories proposed by Aristotle. According to this theory, living beings were classified on an ideal pyramid that represented the simplest animals on the lowest level, with complexity increasing progressively towards the top, occupied by human beings. In the Western world of the time, people believed animal species were eternal and immutable, created with a specific purpose, as this seemed the only possible explanation for the incredible variety of living beings and their surprising adaptation to their habitats. Jean-Baptiste Lamarck was the first biologist to describe a complex theory of evolution. His theory substantially comprised two statements. First, that animal organs and behavior can change according to the way they are used, and second, that those characteristics can transmit from one generation to the next. The example of the giraffe whose neck became long while trying to reach the upper leaves of a tree is well known. The second statement is that every living organisms, human included, tends to reach a greater level of perfection. When Charles Darwin went to the Galapagos Island, he was well aware of Lamarck's theories and was influenced by them. Foundations of Animal Behavior Studies. The study of animal behavior did not begin to emerge as a scientific discipline until the later part of the 19th century. Three major developments contributed significantly to the study of behavior. First, publication of the theory of evolution by natural selection. Second, development of a systematic comparative method. And third, studies in genetics and inheritance. Let us have a look at theory of evolution by natural selection. Ethologists have been concerned particularly with the evolution of behavior and the understanding of behavior in terms of the theory of natural selection. In one sense, the first modern ethologist was Charles Darwin, whose book The Expression of the Emotions in Men and Animals influenced many ethologists. He pursued his interest in behavior by encouraging his protege George Romanes, who investigated animal learning and intelligence using an anthropomorphic method, anecdotal cognitivism that did not gain scientific support. Let us understand the comparative method. George John Romanes formalized the use of comparative method in studying animal behavior. He involved studying non-human animals to gain insights into the behavior of humans. He sought to support Darwin's theory of natural selection through his proposal that mental processes evolve from lower to higher forms and that there is a continuity of mental processes of animals, including other humans, from knowledge of their own. According to Romanes, the similarities between the behavior of human and that of other animals implied similar mental states and reasoning processes in human and non-human species. He suggested that a sequence could be constructed for the evolution of various emotional states in animals. Theories of genetics and inheritance. The third development that greatly influenced research in animal behavior was the birth of science of genetics and the development of modern theories of inheritance. In 1860s, George Gregor Mendel reported on his findings from a series of breeding experiments on garden peas. These studies established key principles of laws of inheritance of biological characteristics. Present day behavioral biology is based on the combination of evolutionary theory that provides an explanation of the processes by which traits can change through time, and genetics, which explains how traits are passed from one generation to the other. Like the morphological and physiological traits, an animal's behavior also has a genetic component. Thus, behavior may change as the species evolves. Behavior genetic analysis had its beginning in these early studies of inheritance and was then greatly expanded in 1930s by R.A. Fisher. Fixed action patterns and animal communication. An important development associated with the name of Konrad Lorenz, though probably due more to his teacher Oscar Henroth, was the identification of fixed action patterns, which is abbreviated as FAPs. Lorenz popularized FAPs as instinctive responses that would occur reliably in the presence of identifiable stimuli called signal stimuli or releasing stimuli. These FAPs could then be compared across species, and the similarities and differences between behavior could be easily compared with the similarities and differences in morphology. An important and much quoted study of the Anatidae, that is ducks and geese, by Henroth used this technique. Ethologists noted that the stimuli that released FAPs were common features of the appearance or behavior of other members of the animal's own species, and they were able to prove how important forms of animal communication could be mediated by a few simple FAPs. The most sophisticated investigation of this kind was the study by Carl von Frisch of the so-called dance language related to bee communication. Lorenz developed an interesting theory of the evolution of animal communication based on his observations of the nature of fixed action patterns and the circumstances in which animals emit them. Writers and observers have marveled at the precision of the complex behavior of animals. The feeding of an insect on flower, the construction of the web or the nest, the flight of a gull, and much else impress us with their elegance and apparent skill. Such patterns are termed as instinctive behavior. The Merriam-Webster dictionary defines instinct as a largely inheritable and unalterable tendency of an organism to make a complex and specific response to environmental stimuli without involving reason. For ethologists, instinct means a series of predictable behaviors for fixed action patterns. Such schemes are only acted when a precise stimulating signal is present. When such signals act as communication among members of the same species, they are known as releasers. A notable example of a releaser is the beak movement in many bird species performed by the newly hatched chicks, which stimulate the mother's regurgitating process to feed her offspring. Another well-known case is the classic experiments by Tinbergen on the Greylag Goose. Like similar waterfowl, the goose rolls a displaced egg near its nest back to the others with its beak. The sight of the displaced egg triggers this mechanism. If the egg is taken away, the animal continues with his behavior, pulling its head back as if an imaginary egg is still being maneuvered by the underside of its beak. Tinbergen found he could produce supernormal stimuli for most instincts in animals, such as cardboard butterflies that male butterflies preferred to mate with if they had darker stripes than a real female. Harvard psychologist Deirdre Barrett has done research pointing out how easily humans also respond to supernormal stimuli for sexual, nurturing, feeding and social instincts. However, a behavior only made of fixed action patterns would be particularly rigid and inefficient, reducing the probability of survival and reproduction. So, the learning process has great importance, as does the ability to change the individual's responses based on its experience. It can be said that the more the brain is complex and the life of the individual is long, the more its behavior is intelligent. Let us talk about learning. Learning, the modification of behavior in response to experiences, is one of the most characteristic attributes of animals. The most important feature of learning is that it is adaptive. Learning occurs in many ways, one of the most elementary being habituation. This process is a decrease in an elicited behavior resulting from the repeated presentation of an eliciting stimulus. In effect, the animal learns to stop responding to irrelevant stimuli. An example of learning by habituation is the one observed in squirrels. When one of them feels threatened, the others hear its signal and go to the nearest refuge. However, if the signal comes from an individual that has caused many false alarms, the other squirrels ignore the signal. When a puff of air is applied to the gills of a horseshoe crab, it responds with a movement of its tail. Lahu, Kokinidis and Corning in 1975 studied the characteristics of habituation of the tail reflex, monitoring the muscle movements electrophysiologically. Another common way of learning is by association, where a stimulus is, based on the experience, linked to another one that may not have anything to do with the first one. The first studies of associative learning was made by Russian physiologist Ivan Pavlov. An example of associative behavior is observed when a common goldfish goes close to the water surface whenever a human is going to feed it, or the excitement of a dog whenever it sees a collar as a prelude for a walk. Let us talk about imprinting. In the modern period, the process by which a young mammal or bird becomes attached to an object has been called imprinting. It has been principally studied among birds such as ducks and geese, but comparable behavior has been systematically observed among domestic dogs. Being able to discriminate the members of one's own species is also of fundamental importance for reproductive success. Such discrimination can be based on a number of factors. However, this important type of learning only takes place in a very limited period of time. This kind of learning is called imprinting and was a second important finding of Lawrence. Lawrence observed that the young of birds such as geese and chickens followed their mothers spontaneously from almost the first day after they were hatched, and he discovered that this response could be imitated by an arbitrary stimulus if the eggs were incubated artificially and the stimuli were presented during a critical period that continued for a few days after hatching. W. Sluckin observed buffalo calves which have followed horses and a zebra foal which followed a car. Hence, imprinting also means the development of tendency in early life to follow or approach an object. Manipulation. The test of intelligence includes nothing that involves the use of tools or improvising equipment to attain an end. The manipulation of chimpanzees in natural conditions has been described in detail by Jane van Leeuwenhoek Goodall and W. C. McGrew in 1970. Chimpanzees eat ants and termites in large numbers, and to get them out of their nest, a chimpanzee pokes a stick into an entrance of an ant hill and they draws it out. The insects clinging on the sticks are licked off. They select stick that is straight, remove leaves and branches to make them more serviceable. Sometimes they crush leaves and use them as a sponge to scoop up water that cannot be reached with the lips, or use crushed leaves as a brush to clean the fur. They even wave the stick or throw them as part of threatening displays towards other chimpanzees. Let us talk about imitation. Imitation is often an important type of learning. A well-documented example of imitative learning occurred in a group of macaques on Hachijojima Island, Japan. The macaques lived in the inland forest until the 1960s, when a group of researchers started giving them potatoes on the beach. Soon they started venturing onto the beach, picking the potatoes from the sand and cleaning and eating them. About 1 year later, an individual was observed bringing a potato to the sea, putting it into the water with one hand and cleaning it with the other. Her behavior was soon imitated by the individuals living in contact with her. When they gave birth, they taught this practice to their young ones. The National Institute of Health reported that capuchin monkeys preferred the company of researchers who imitated them to that of researchers who did not. The monkeys not only spent more time with their imitators, but also preferred to engage in a simple task with them, even when provided with the option of performing the same task with a non-imitator. Reproductive behavior. Biological fitness is a function not only of animals' ability to survive, but also of its ability to contribute to the gene pool of the next generation and subsequent generations to reproduce. The term courtship, used by the ethologist, refers to all the behavioral interactions of the male and female which come and lead to the fertilization of eggs by sperm. Different species often do not get a chance to interbreed because they live in different geographic areas or in different localities within an area, or they might be active at different times of the day. They usually do not because they respond differently to the sexual lures. Mating and the fight for supremacy. The male reproductive success is probably limited by the number of females they can attract and defend from other males rather than their sperm supply. Natural selection will favor any property in a male that enables him to mate with more females. The most obvious form of competition for females is straightforward fighting. In toads, for instance, the males sit on the back of the female for few days before the female lays her eggs. Other males try to dislodge the sitting males from the females by pulling them off. In other species, males have evolved special weapons with which they fight over females. The narwhal's tusk is also an example. Individual reproduction is the most important phase in the proliferation of individuals or genes within a species. For this reason, there exist complex mating rituals which can be very complex even if they are often regarded as fixed action patterns. The stickleback's complex mating ritual was studied by Tinbergen and is regarded as a notable example of a FAP. Male stickleback displays a red belly during the breeding season. At the same time, female carries 100 to 150 eggs in its abdomen, is indication to males for courtship. Male performs zigzag dance and brushes the female. The female shows her acceptance if she is pleased and shows head up posture where her head points upwards and body becomes U-shaped, indicating that she is ready. The male moves to the nest which was prepared earlier by the male. This is the site where reproduction will occur. Often in social life, animals fight for the right to reproduce as well as social supremacy. A common example of fighting for social and sexual supremacy is so-called pecking order among poultry. Every time a group of poultry cohabitate for a certain time length, they establish a pecking order. In these groups, one chicken dominates the others and can peck without being pecked. Let us talk about evolution of societies. Several animal species, including humans, tend to live in groups. Animals form groups to enhance their foraging success and gain better protection against predators, but it also exposes them to diseases, competition and social interference. Group size is a major aspect of their social environment. Social life is probably a complex and effective survival strategy. It may be regarded as a sort of symbiosis among individuals of the same species. A society is composed of a group of individuals belonging to the same species, living within well-defined rules on food management, role assignments and reciprocal dependence. Communication. Whenever we see an animal that is brightly colored or boldly patterned, or one that is making a loud and obvious noise, we can be pretty certain that communication of some sort is taking place. Most often, communication is between members of the same species, and the risk comes when predators cue in on this as a mean of finding meals. Sometimes, however, different species communicate with one another, like prey animals that forsake their camouflage and communicate directly with predators that might eat them. The signals convey information in three different forms. First, discrete and graded signals. Some signals are discrete, that is digital, and others are graded, that is analog. The alarm calls of many species, which are typically given at the same intensity each time and are relatively constant across the species, permit communication among different species. These discrete signals are of a frequency and duration that make them difficult for predators to pinpoint. Graded signals may vary in intensity as a function of the strength of the stimulus. The waggle dance of the honeybee illustrates both the complexity and the graded properties of signals. The number of turns per minute is inversely proportional to the distance from the food source, and the duration and liveliness of the dance increases with the quality of the food. Although the burst of light emitted by fireflies seem to be discrete and species specific, They vary in intensity and duration under different conditions. Second, distance and duration. Although most species are limited to about 20 to 40 different displays, signals can vary in several other ways that increase their information content. The distance a signal travels may vary. A small amount of material produced by female can be detected by a male several kilometers downwind. Visual displays at the other extreme usually operate over much shorter distances. The duration of the signal may also vary. Alarm signals such as chemicals produced by many invertebrates may have a localized short-term effect and thus a rapid fade-out time. Information about reproductive status like the antlers of male deer or the bright red perineal region of female rhesus monkeys in estrus is conveyed during the breeding season. In contrast, the brightly colored epaulets on the red-winged blackbird, although present during the entire breeding season, are conspicuous only when the male exposes and erects these feathers during the song spread. Third, composite signals, syntax and context. Two or more signals can be combined to form a composite signal with a new meaning. For example, equids such as zebras communicate hostile behavior by flattening their ears and communicate friendliness by raising their ears, that is discrete signals. They indicate the intensity of either emotion by degree to which the mouth opens, which indicates the graded signal. The mouth opening pattern is the same for both hostile and friendly behavior. Growth of ethology. Due to the work of Lawrence and Timbergen, ethology developed strongly in continental Europe during the years prior to World War II. After the war, Timbergen moved to the University of Oxford and ethology became stronger in the UK with the additional influence of William Thorpe, Robert Hint and Patrick Batson at the sub-department of animal behavior of the University of Cambridge located in the village of Medingley. In this period too, ethology began to develop strongly in North America. Ethology is now a well-recognized scientific discipline and has a number of journals covering developments in the subject such as the Ethology Journal. Today, along with actual ethologists, many biologists, zoologists, primatologists, anthropologists, veterinarians and physicians study ethology and other related fields such as animal psychology, the study of animal social groups and animal cognition. Some researchers has begun to study a typical or disordered animal behavior. Most researchers in the field have some sort of advanced degree and specialty and subspecialty training in the aforementioned fields.